behalf of University for Life, welcome to the second annual Creativity and Culture Conference. Brief introductions. My name is Jezvia Mahil, as you know, and I'm the director of University for Life, which is an education consultancy specializing in development of creativity skills. So, Kat, if I could just move on to you, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a creativity and business consultant, and I connect people to their true nature and purpose to make it their business. And I work with the premise that current business is fatally flawed because we lead with profit. And I've designed a model where we lead with the creative spirit. And that brings us wellness, fulfillment, legacy, and prosperity. So it's been trialed with 200 entrepreneurs around the world. And they all found that it, moved them into their groove. They're following their own hearts, their own creative spirit. And they're all happy and well.
Okay, excellent. And Lucy?
I'm Lucy Makara, and I am the founder and managing editor of Rethink Press, which is a hybrid publisher publishing mainly business and self-development books. I'm also an author. I've written 11 books, 3 of which were novels, and I also mentor writing, so all the most of the entrepreneurs that I work with at the moment I mentor through the writing process, but I've also mentored fiction writers as well.
Okay, excellent. So Kat, we had a conversation and you spoke a lot about burnout because you specialize in helping women especially to resolve their emotional issues, perhaps around burnout and whatever. And I come from a teaching background, and at the moment, a lot of teachers in the UK are leaving the profession due to burnout. It's almost like a crisis. It is a crisis. More and more teachers are leaving because they just cannot cope. So what advice would you give to help teachers who are really passionate about their work, and that's why they end up burning out? What would you recommend to avoid burnout?
Do you know, my sister is having exactly this experience right now. She's an absolutely wonderful teacher. She's been teaching for 25 years in geography, and she teaches beyond her subject. She teaches kids to be kind. She teaches them to, come into their full potential, to follow their own hearts and so on. So she's an amazing teacher. And these are the teachers that are leaving. We don't want them to. So I know the crisis well. And the advice for teachers, I was reading a great article today about how environment isn't actually about having too much work to do. It's about the managers that you work with and the environment that you're in. So I found that really fascinating. It's not actually your fault, because I had a lot of shame and felt a lot of blame around experiencing burnout. So to actually have the perspective that it's the environment that you're in, and the management style, which is pretty toxic because they're not giving clear roles, they're not giving clear areas of responsibility, they're giving you too much to do or whatever. And this is what I find that teachers specifically are experiencing. They're just expected to do far too much. And they're underpaid, they're undervalued, and then, they're stretched. So I think there needs a fundamental system change. And if you're in a system, so I was in a work environment that wasn't going to change. So, listening to my own heart, connecting back to my own soul and that what was true for me, I realized that I could no longer, if I wasn't valuing myself and my worth, then I was putting myself in harm's way if I was going to stay in that environment as it was. So I had a choice to make. And I think this is the choice that teachers are making right now. They can either stay in this toxic environment that underpays and gives them too much to do and puts them under too much pressure and is abusive, or they can leave. That's kind of what they're faced with. So I think for teachers, it has to be a fundamental management change, and they need to start listening, because it is a crisis. They should have listened a while ago. They've got a thing coming in around sabbaticals and giving teachers a sabbatical, and that would be amazing. If you've been in teaching for 10, 15, 20 years, I think you'll be able to have a sabbatical. So you actually get the time to take a breath. But for teachers, I think you've got to decide, what's more important, my health, my life, my own truth, or do I stay and keep putting myself in harm's way?
Yeah, because a lot of the work that teachers have to do is mundane admin work, no creativity in it at all. And so it can be very draining. You know, I used to be marking assignments, like hundreds of assignments, and I felt more like a factory worker, just getting through, you know, it's like being on a conveyor belt, getting through this marking, and it just wasn't very creative. And all the work that I was passionate about, I was having to do at the weekends and, you know, during holiday times. Yeah,
it's really tough. And now my sister's going through a thing at the moment where there's lots of schools are grouped together with this academy system, and then they're all expected to get together with these other schools as well and brainstorm ideas. Well, you know, they're already over capacity in their own school, so to keep adding extra things like that, I think, is cruel and abusive. And I think that needs, you know, there needs to be, the teachers need to get together and say no. That's what needs to happen there for their creative spirit to take the lead. They're the wise ones. They know it's too much. The creative spirit is saying no, and that needs to be listened to and respected.
Here's a thought, and I'm thinking about how to reframe everything that's just been said. And what came to mind was first line responders. Here in North America, there's been a lot of firefighting. You can see sometimes a fire is consuming hundreds and thousands of acres, and you have thousands of firefighters, and it's something that's life and death. And so when you look at the psychology of that front row that's dealing with it, they have rotation. They have a whole psychology that those frontline responders are dealing with, and dealing with life and death. And in a way, there's this kind of myopia about teachers. And if you think about teachers being on the front line of something that is as life and death based, except it's not in the instant, it's life and death over a period of 30 years. You're educating the next generation. But if there was an understanding that those people are like military fighting a war, and you have that front line engaged in the enemy here is ignorance, and indifference and incivility and toxicity and all the things that the current system is abusing, is a consequence of, because of that ignorance you're talking about. It's systemic. But if one were to reframe what educators are having to contend with and put it in the same notion of that catastrophe, that disaster, that thing that has an immense cost, and that there needs to be a new framing around how one looks at frontline responders who happen to be teachers, instead of just thinking the teachers are in this cocoon and everything is fine, but to recognize that especially those teachers, and we work in education and we work with schools that have very high at-risk populations. We work with very diverse at-risk populations. And so those frontline caregivers are burning out because they care so much, but the system is abusive because they take those people for granted. And to your point, it's not so much about organizing around a specific a goal, but rather I think would be helpful to reframe what the profession is actually contending with and why it's closer to firefighting than it is to something more benign like a camp counselor, if you get my drift.
Okay.
Could I make a comment?
Go ahead, Chris.
Following from what Howard said about looking at it systemically, and what Kat has said about redesigning the corporation, the modern capitalist corporation has as its main goal the return of profit to shareholders. It doesn't, that's their primary goal, and a few have secondary social goals. But if you follow any of the political debates going on in this country, they say that teachers don't count because they're not generating a profit. And they'll say the health service, doctors and nurses don't count because they're not generating a profit. And yet the teachers, doctors, and anyone working in public service are central to any economy. You can work out the reasons why. So I think teachers are feeling the pressure because the government doesn't value them because they're not part of
that's the fatal flaw in business, is that we pursue profit before people.
Yeah.
Before looking after people. And that's, you know, that's what I find creates burnout, because, you know, everything else is secondary to this pursuit of profit and money. And when you allow the creative spirit to lead, then, you know, you have wisdom in there as well, you know, and that changes everything. That creates a system change, essentially.
And the creativity is what the children, what the students need most from teachers. And when you go into burnout phase, you may leave, and that's terrible. That has a terrible effect on the students, but you may stay. But what goes is the creativity. You go through the motions, you carry out the lesson.
It's almost worse.
But yes, exactly. Yes, maybe. But you lose the creative side of your energy.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than being with an uninspired teacher all day long.
No,
you know, who hates being there. That's abusive to our kids too.
Absolutely. So Lucy, I was just going to ask about burnout in your industry, because in the publishing and writing industry, there are writers who they call it by different names. They say that what is it when they're burnt out, that they've reached a block and they can't write anymore.
Yes, they call it writer's block, and I mean it happens for all sorts of reasons. I suppose if you are a creative writer, you may it's sort of like almost like stage fright. You kind of seize up and can't think of anything else to write about in some cases, and that's a hard thing to get over until I don't know what the answer is really, except to sort of relax about it. And I think the more you panic about it and not being able to be creative, the less creative you are. So you just kind of have to open up and see what comes to you and try things out. And sometimes you've got to start ideas for books, and then it'll turn out not to be useful, not to be something you can finish. But I mean, for me, I think for most people, my advice is usually just keep writing. It doesn't matter what you're writing, but the actual act of writing itself generates creativity.
But when
get into nature as well. But
absolutely.
There's a beautiful film by a writer who had writer's block called Ben Cox, who then started wild swimming, and it was his reconnection with nature which then took him into his reconnection with himself that then brought forth his new, he's then connected back to creative inspiration. That was me too. I had an immersion in nature, and that connected me back to my creative inspiration, and that brought forth a creative renaissance. So nature.
Yes, and I think it's not just the act of sitting and writing. When you're writing something creative, you need to have thinking time and meditation time and time when you just let ideas flow. And I mean, personally, I find that just walking in nature is just is when it works for me. And I think for a lot of people too. That's floating in the Caribbean Sea. That's been my my joy. Great.
Yeah, everyone has that privilege, Kat.
No, I know, but you can. I'm in Slough at the moment. I've just been walking around Burnham Beaches. It's absolutely glorious. So you can find nature wherever you are.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Do you think there are parallels, Kat, then between burnout that teachers experience and burnout that writers experience due to, and is the process similar?
I'm seeing my sister. I think it's the pressures of the system that she's in. The mismanagement and so on, and the ridiculous, no pay rises for 10 years and things like that, and how they go underappreciated. So for me, it's the system and the environment they're in, rather than with a writer, it's kind of down to you. Writing's almost a solo pursuit. You might have something different to say on this, Lucy, but I
agree with you. I think it's yes, I mean, writing is very singular. It's your own ideas. It's usually something you do on your own, not collaboratively. It's not performative. I mean, I think one of the creative parts of teaching, because I do a lot of sort of workshops and things as well, is actually that you're performing, that you're, you know, you as a teacher. I mean, that's why I think that, you know, the burnout is so intense, because you are performing all day, every day.
Yeah, my sister said she has, was it 240 kids that she's responsible for? She has to do 5 passionate, enthusiastic, engaging presentations every day. If she was doing that in a corporate, she'd be on 6 figures.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
she's working for the state. She's probably getting a fraction of that.
Well, absolutely, you know. So, but you know, you're saying that writing being a solo pursuit. Have you seen the way that Brené Brown writes her books? And she gathers a group of friends together, and they talk through a conversation, pull out the main points, and she goes and writes them. And I just think, what a wonderful creative approach.
Yes, that's a great way to do it too. But even so, I think you can discuss things. You can have a mentor and a coach, and I do a lot of mentoring and coaching of writers. But actually, when you are actually writing, you are on your own, and you've got to pretty much just get on with it. I mean, I've also written books with other people as well. But even so, you know, it's one person writing and then another person edits it. So, I mean, you talk about it, and there's a huge creative input from the discussion, absolutely. But
the writing, the actual writing piece, and being the channel for your creativity, that's the glory, isn't it? That's what we all write for, essentially.
Yes, the glory and the problem as well.
Yeah, especially when it's not there. But yeah, that beautiful connection of when you write and it's coming as if, you know, through you, and you know, that's you're not having to struggle for it. It's just
no. But having said that, I mean, I think we discussed Jesvia before, being the concept of being in flow, and I think, you know, that's the ideal, and I'm sure it's the same with teaching. When you're in flow, it just all comes naturally. But actually, when you're writing, being in flow doesn't necessarily produce the best writing, which is interesting. Sometimes a bit of writing that you really struggle to get out, the response to it is actually sort of, you know, can be fantastic. And some bit that you sort of felt was massively creative and wonderful, actually people don't necessarily like that bit. So I don't think that the feeling of being creative, in a sense, the enjoyment you have in the creative act, is necessarily an indicator of how good it is. But I think, you know, with teaching, if you lose that, you've lost everything, really.
Yeah, and that leads me, Lucy, to talking about the packaging, because you talk about structure and about how presentation is really important for creativity, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, I think, you know, there's creativity in the kind of compulsion to create, I mean, it might be artistic, it might be, you know, painting, drawing, writing, and you can do that on your own, and you don't have to package, you don't have to structure, you can just do whatever you like, and that's, you know, it's the pleasure of actually doing it that counts. But actually, if you want to market or sell or get your work published, you've got to package it in some way that it's either the gatekeeper or the public, or, you know, whoever it is, your readers are going to understand, are going to resonate with. And I think that, you know, you do have to think about structure and just the free flowing. I mean, it might work, it might be fantastic, but then again, you know, it might just be self-indulgent. So I think you've got to consider what your aims are, what your goals are, when you're being creative, and have some sort of you know, constraints on that. I mean, I think it's Google who say creativity loves constraints, and I think that's right in many ways. If you become kind of more creative sometimes if you've got to fit into certain whatever it is, structures or outcomes or something like that. It can make you more creative rather than less. So I think packaging to call it that in the broadest sense, though it's kind of sounds awful in a way to talk about packaging creativity, but I think you do have to, if you want it to, your creativity to have use, if you like, then I think you've got to think about the outcomes.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, Kat, your work in Antigua compared with Slough. Like if you said you were running retreats in Slough compared with you're running retreats in Antigua, it's a very different kind of packaging, and the persuasion would probably be...
It is. Although I would say with true business, the purpose of that is so that you can align with your purpose, and there has to be a structure for your creativity to flow through, I think. Otherwise it will just dissipate, and you need a financial structure as well. It's a business, you know, you do. So what I've found is aligning with your purpose and then bringing forth your heart's offering. That allows you to serve the people that you're here to serve and to fulfill your purpose, and it gives you, you know, your signature product, if you like. When that comes forth from your heart, that's an amazing piece of, you know, it's an amazing structure for your creativity to go through, for you to master that area. You become a leading authority in that space, and you know, and that becomes your legacy as well. So for me, I think business can be a really powerful structure for the creative spirit if we remove this premise that business is just about profit. And if you bring in the premise that, you know, business is about you expressing your creativity, fulfilling your purpose, being of service, and leaving a legacy, making a difference in the world. Imagine if we had business like that, you know, that allowed you to express the full creative potential of who you are in the world. You know, when you package your business like that, I think it becomes really powerful. It's from the heart, so people connect to it really strongly. It's expansive because the heart's expansive, that, you know, it doesn't have the limitations of that didn't work before, those experts are doing it this way, so we have to do it this way. You know, it's its own energy system, and yeah, I think that works really powerfully. It connects heart to heart with others, and I think that's what we want more than ever. I think we're a bit sick of, you know, businesses that are void of creativity and imagination and heart and inspiration.
That's really interesting that you say that, Kat, because I work with small business owners, entrepreneurs, and the interesting thing, I mean, and most of them have that. I mean, you know, they want to make money as well, but you know, it's not just about profit. Most of the people I work with are wonderfully heart-centered and wanting to benefit their clients, or you know, whoever it is, their customers. And the interesting thing is that when we work on their book, they get a whole new insight into their business, because the act of writing, planning the book, describing their process, unpacking what it is they do and what it is they know, often gives them a whole new vision of their business. And sometimes they have to go away and recreate their business and then come back and write the book that fits the business. So
yeah, I love that. It certainly happened to me when I was writing the True Business book. Absolutely what you described, and this deepening and it's so fulfilling as well. Was a fulfillment in my business that just wasn't there before. So, you know, and I like you said, these people are heart-centered, and they don't get up in the morning to make money. They get up in the morning because they want to make a difference and all these other things. And there has to be a way of being in business that allows that to thrive, I think, and opens that up rather than shutting it down. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of here for.
Yeah.
I love that you're doing that too. That's great.
Yes, no, likewise. And going back to the packaging, I'm very kind of, as a business book mentor, writing mentor, I'm very focused on them getting the structure of their book and the package of it, because the book then goes out there and tells their industry, their market, their clients and prospects what they're about and what they're doing. And you know, it's very much about having themselves in the book, not just sort of, you know, lots of sort of hard facts, but you know, having a creative element to that writing as well.
Yeah, and visuals are really powerful. They tell a powerful story. You know, at the Homeless World Cup, we had amazing, compelling visual branding that, you know, brought out the grit, the spirit, and the glory of the tournament, which was using football to beat homelessness and change people's lives. And we use powerful images of people who are homeless in their in their power and brilliance rather than, you know, oh, poor me. And we really used images to break down stereotypes. So I think, you know, and we used powerful colors, and you know, I love that aspect of the design, and, you know, authentically expressing the essence of what you're communicating, I think is important visually as it is in words.
Okay.
Yes, Jess, Vera, have you?
Go ahead, Lucy.
Oh, sorry, I was just, I don't know if you've seen that Kathleen's written some notes.
That's right, I know, Kathleen, that you've been trying hard to join in the conversation, but when we tried, sorry, the microphone just didn't work. And I know this has been an intriguing conversation. I wish we could continue with it, but it's time for the next interview. It's 7:30, but there will be a chance for us to continue these discussions and these debates, because this session was just to start off, like, exploring what it is that we're interested in and what is it that we want to explore further. So we will have monthly follow-up sessions every third Saturday of the month at 9 a.m, 2 p.m, and 7 p.m. Those times are to cater for the different time zones, you know, to cater for the New Zealanders and the Australians and the Canadians, like Howard, and the people who live in Antigua, like Kat. So I look forward to seeing you at those monthly events. So thank you very much for your contribution, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you
so much. Thank you for gathering
Thank
us
you.
together. Thank you.